Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Delighted to have you with us. You know, it looks like the elites may be turning on the Democrats, which is a strange thing because the liberal media has usually been against the Republicans. Now, an expose in the Washington Post, of all things, talking about Fusion GPS. You said, what is Fusion GPS? Well, that is the company, the mysterious company that was behind the Christopher Steele expose and the dossier on Trump. It turns out it was paid for by the Democrats, by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And the whole thing has been put up, and the FBI has been dancing to their tune, and there needs to be an investigation of the FBI for their complicity in this thing. I mean, it is a scandal of major proportions, and it was featured in the Washington Post. How about them apples?
Wow, that's pretty, this is breaking news.
Well, it is big time. I mean, Fusion GPS. But the thing is, while that's going on, the Republicans are fighting each other. They ought to say, my enemies are in collapse. It's time to attack. Instead of that, they're fighting each other. Talk about it.
Yeah, the public feuding among Republicans began just before President Trump made his latest pitch for his tax plan in Washington. And as Abigail Robertson reports, not everyone gave him a warm welcome.
It's no secret President Trump has enemies, even within his own party. That all came to the forefront Tuesday as President Trump spoke to Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill, trying to unite the party around tax reform. But talks of unity were off to a rocky start when Senator Bob Corker made these comments ahead of his visit.
I expressed concerns a few weeks ago about his leadership and just his stability and the lack of desire to be competent on issues and understand, and you know, nothing has changed.
President Trump fired back on Twitter, calling Corker incompetent and saying he couldn't even get elected as dog catcher. But the biggest news came when Arizona Senator Jeff Flake announced he will not seek re-election in 2018, criticizing today's political state, saying America has lost its moorings.
It is also clear to me for the moment that we have given in or given up on the core principles in favor of a more viscerally satisfying anger and resentment.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell steered clear of the feuds, saying he wants to concentrate on their agenda and not any other distractions.
What I have an obligation to do is to try to achieve the greatest cohesion I can among 52 Republicans, to try to achieve for the American people the agenda that we set out to achieve. And tax reform is what we are about. If there's anything that unifies Republicans, it's tax reform.
The tax plan seems to be on schedule, with House Republicans saying they're even willing to pass a Senate budget resolution many don't agree with in order to expedite tax reform.
I think the Senate budget is awful, and I will vote for it because the outcome of tax reform is so important.
We whipped it yesterday, and I whipped for it. It's not everything that we want, but I'm like Ronald Reagan. You take 70% of what you can now and come back for the rest of it later.
Congressional leaders are trying to have a tax plan in place by the beginning of next year, knowing that if they don't, they could pay the price in the 2018 elections. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
It is so important that they pass that tax plan, and it's a real possibility, the way things are coming, they might get it done before Christmas, which would be awesome. It would be a great achievement that they could go into the next year with. I mean, let's hope that's going to be the case. What do you think?
Well, I know that is Trump's #1 thing right now, but all this fighting and this Twitter wars is really putting a wrench in everything.
They'll stop that. You know, I think Mitch, I really have a lot of confidence in Mitch McConnell. Yeah. And I also have confidence in the intelligence of these people. They understand they've got to do it. They don't, it's not an optional extra. It's not something that they can put aside and not do. They screwed up on health care. They had said for 7 years, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Then came the crucial vote, and John McCain faltered, and a couple of those the women, one from Maine and one from Alaska, voted against it, and so they couldn't repeal it. But in terms of tax relief, they can't go before the American people saying, we've raised your taxes or we haven't cut your taxes. And the Democrats can't stand against it. If they want to go before the American people and say, well, we're the ones that kept you from having a break of $2,000 or $3,000 a year in your taxes, we kept that from happening. Aren't you proud of us? So the answer is you're going to be kicked out of office, and they all know it. So it's happening, and we're very delighted to see that. But it very possibly could go through before Christmas. And if that's the case, it would be a wonderful Christmas present for the American people. Well, and as I mentioned earlier in this show, investigations into the Trump administration have routinely been in the headlines. But now Democrats are under the microscope. Can you believe that? John Jessup has it.
That's right, Pat. Congressional Republicans have launched 2 investigations, including one involving a deal that gave Russia control of 20% of the U.S. uranium supply. And there's a new report about who paid for the controversial research against candidate Donald Trump in last year's election. Mark Martin has the story.
Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign is once again in the spotlight after the Washington Post report that the campaign and the Democratic National Committee helped pay for political research into Donald Trump. That research was carried out by a group called Fusion GPS, and it resulted in the now well-known dossier, which contained allegations about Trump's connections to Russia and possible collusion between the Kremlin and Trump's campaign. A person familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity provided the information. Trump has repeatedly said the document is not true, and he recently questioned on Twitter if Democrats or the FBI assisted in funding it. The person familiar with the matter said an attorney for the Clinton campaign and the DNC, along with his law firm, brokered the deal. The information has been used in the probe into Russian meddling in last year's election by special counsel Robert Mueller. And House Republicans have started 2 new investigations, one into the Obama administration's Justice Department and the other involving Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. Republican House leaders want to know how President Obama's Justice Department handled a deal that ended up putting Russia in charge of more than 20% of the U.S. supply of uranium.
So what we're here today to announce is an inquiry into Russia's involvement into the uranium deal that was done several years ago. This is just the beginning of this probe.
We do have a witness who is a confidential informant who wants to talk about his role in this, and we're in contact with the Justice Department to release him from a non-disclosure agreement. If that doesn't work out in timely fashion, then we obviously would be able to subpoena him.
Democrats say the Republican-led investigations are designed to distract attention from the different probes into alleged Russian meddling in last year's presidential election. Clinton said the same thing and called the new attention on the uranium deal baloney. But Republicans say they want to know how the deal worked and why 20% of the United States uranium was given to a Russian-owned company. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. Pat, back to you.
You know, we had the man who wrote the expose on the Clinton money. It was so clear. This particular corporation was Canadian, and the Canadian company gave large sums in prep stock to the Clinton Foundation. There was no question about it. And this uranium one was one of the permutations of that company as they got more and more of the uranium. Uranium is crucial. You know, it's crucial to build atomic bombs. And without uranium, you don't have anything. So by giving up the American sources of uranium to the Russians, we have crippled ourselves in the future. And this was a payoff to the Clinton Foundation. And the research was very clear on it. It was out a long time ago, and nobody's been talking about it. But suddenly it's gotten, because it's become uranium-1. It wasn't uranium-1 initially. It was something else. It had a different name. And the person who was involved in it gained several $billion. We're talking about big money. And he, again, was a contributor of huge amounts of money to the Clinton Foundation, while I think Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, at least just before that. But in any event, the whole thing just stinks to high heaven. And it looks like the FBI with James Comey is seriously compromised. And it looks like Mueller was involved. You know, Holder was the Attorney General. That whole bunch was compromised. And the whole thing looks tainted. And it looks like to me that they are not qualified to continue this probe. And I think it's time for the president to tell his Rosenstein and those others in his administration, the special prosecutor has got to go. It's time to cut this thing off. And I believe that you'll hear in the next, well, few months that Trump has said enough already. You haven't found one thing. We weren't complicit with any Russians. This whole thing was a scam paid for by the Democrats, and we want to shut this inquiry down. And I think maybe some of the congressional committees will come up with some different answers, but it'll all be supportive of Trump. And I think it's time to stop it, because the FBI is seriously compromised. Comey and Mueller together, along with Loretta Lynch and those in the Justice Department, seriously compromised. Well, there's a good news out of the FBI, however, and John has that report, so it isn't all bad. Here's the good news from that agency.
That's right, Pat. On the flip side, this year, a special FBI trafficking effort has saved 84 children from a life of slavery and abuse. Heather Sells gives us this behind-the-scenes look at an annual trafficking sting that leads to rescues across the country.
The FBI partners with state and local authorities to go after traffickers of children right in our own backyards. Perhaps the most disturbing case this year, the sale of a 3-month-old baby and a 5-year-old for $600. Agents scoured online sites and ads to discover many of the children being trafficked. Their search took them to hotels where they found kids, along with lots of cell phones, cash, and even stuffed animals.
Our primary goal is really to recover children, and then not only from the recovery standpoint, but providing them victim services to get them back home or back integrated into society.
Victim specialists working with the officers help assure the rescued that they're safe and that help is available.
You're okay, all right? You're not in trouble.
Trying to figure out what their background is. Are they runaways? Have they been in the system in foster care? Do they have any kind of juvenile delinquency history? What does their parent life look like? Do they have any support? Have they been in school?
She shut the door. She started walking behind the RV.
Agents also located victims in casinos and at truck stops. And they found children from other countries.
They can help you stay in the United States or go back home to family. So you don't have to deal with the scary stuff.
Victim advocates quickly point out these operations only make a dent in the problem. Although no one knows the real number, it's believed thousands of children are sexually exploited in the U.S. each year. Those rescued face a long and hard recovery, and advocates maintain the U.S. does not put enough resources into caring for these children. Their trauma is often compared to post-traumatic stress disorder, which requires a host of services and the grace of God to overcome. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. Well, the case of a baker who wouldn't make a cake for a gay marriage celebration is likely to be the biggest religious rights case in this Supreme Court term. Now, those who oppose Jack Phillips, the baker, accuse him of discrimination against gays. But as Paul Strand reports, some who have suffered discrimination in America for centuries are offering Phillips their support.
Some folks say when Colorado baker Jack Phillips refused to bake a cake to celebrate a gay wedding, that was the same as segregationists in the South refusing to serve blacks at lunch counters. But others say there's a whole different side to the story.
we gather in support of Jack
This group of civil rights leaders has come together to insist that Jack Phillips' refusal as a Christian to support gay marriage isn't even close to the kind of discrimination shown against African Americans in the past. They've launched a website, WeGotYourBackJack.com. Janet Boynes lived as a lesbian for 14 years, but came out of that lifestyle.
I am very concerned that the LGBT activists have hijacked the civil rights movement for African Americans. The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s was a movement to secure for African Americans the basic privileges and the right of U.S. citizenship that whites and others already had. Homosexuals, on the other hand, have always had the rights. They continue, however, to demand special rights based on their sexual behavior.
This is based on a sin and a faith issue.
These folks point out the real discrimination here isn't against the gays, but the religious believers.
A person, according to their faith, should not be compelled to take part in what they believe is a sin.
If you don't allow a person to live by his conscience, you're discriminating against a Christian. Not only are they coming against him, but they're coming against the Constitution of these United States of America.
And Henderson warns that limiting someone's freedom of religion goes against America's principles.
When we start to infringe upon another person's rights, then we have taken away the freedom that America offers.
Sexual behavior is not the same as skin color. I could change from gay to straight, but I cannot change the color of my skin. It is an immutable, unchangeable characteristic. I resent having my race compared to what other people do in bed.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
And Pat, a lot of people will be paying close attention to this case when it goes to oral arguments in early December.
No question. I've been wondering how long it's going to take the black folks to say just exactly what those people said. You know, this is skin color. It's a different matter. The one is a preference of how I'm going to perform sex acts. And to give that class of people special privileges beyond what you would normally expect is wrong. And, you know, the Constitution, the First Amendment, is so clear. Congress, of course, it's Congress, not the states, but Congress will make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. We can't establish a religion, nor can we prohibit the free exercise of it. And when this is done on the federal level or by the state level, this is a state action against these bakers who said, we will not participate in homosexuality. And yet the state said, we're going to fine you unless you do. And what these black folks are saying very, very clearly is that, look, what we were fighting for was basic rights as Americans. These people are asking for special privileges. And I don't think we should give it to them. But it's going before the Supreme Court. And I believe with the Constitution of the Supreme Court as it is, that they'll come down on the side of the bakers, but we'll have to see. John.
Well, Pat, in health news, the rate of cancer cases tied to being overweight and obesity is on the rise in the United States. The director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warns while the rate of other cancers has dropped in the last decade, cancers linked to being overweight have been climbing. CDC Director Brenda Fitzgerald writes on FoxNews.com that even though 2 out of 3 adults weigh more than they should, fewer than half of Americans know that being obese raises their risk of cancer. And Pat, she also adds that avoiding gaining weight is one of the best ways to stay healthy.
Well, we've been talking about this. First of all, they're talking about sugar being a causative agent in a number of these illnesses. We've known about type 2 diabetes, adult onset diabetes, which is a killer, and some of these other things. And they use the term inflammation, and that's there. But weight gain, tremendous weight gain, leading to heart attacks, leading to cancer, leading to other diseases. Wendy, I'm so glad that you stay fit. You're out hiking around the mountains.
You know, I love to hike, and I love fish. I am in love. I've been eating so much fish this summer and fall, and it really does help keep your weight down. It's such a great protein. I have a friend who catches a lot of flounder, and it's so easy to make, and it cooks so quickly, and you feel amazing after. So if you just have your fish and your salad, and you still can have dessert if you don't have bread. And I told you, in Canada, and they have the best chocolate up there, Pat. I don't know what it is about Canada and their chocolate is so much better than ours. I think it's their cream, their cows, or I don't know. Cream.
And you ate a lot of that?
Oh, I do. Especially when I'm traveling. You need the sugar to, when you're traveling.
Well, they catch a bunch of salmon up there. That's good. But
that's right.
Fish are very healthy. There's no question. And fish oil, the DHA is the type of fish oil that's good for your heart. And I believe in taking that. It's very important. But